Hello, I'm Lori Duff. I am the author of the Fisher at Law series, and I am here today with Sheri Joseph. She's the author of Edge of the Known World, and I'm excited today to talk to her about who she would have a beer with, who would be her bestie, and who she would banish. So, hello, Sheri.
Hello, Lori.
Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your book so we have some context when we start talking about your characters?
Sure. I'm grateful to be here. This is so fun. It's such a great idea. Um, Edge of the Known World is a literary thriller and a love story about a brilliant young refugee who is caught up in an era, very near, very realistic era, where genetic screening tests like 23andMe make it impossible to hide a secret identity anymore or a secret ancestry. So this girl has found out, Alex Tashin has found out when she's 16 that she's here illegally. Um, she's from a part of the world, a very bad part of the world, where people have a kind of an accidental little genetic marker. And if she gets her driver's license, applies to the universities, anything that normal young women do, she's going to get detected at the little cheek swabs they do now instead of a fingerprint and probably get deported back to a very, very bad place. So she's dealing with all of this. She has an adoptive father who gave her a gene therapy that helps camouflage it, but doesn't completely get rid of it. She's got about a 1 in 10 chance of getting caught in any screening. So it's that kind of stakes in the novel. Her adoptive father disappears, and it sets her off on a crazy adventure, international adventure that pulls in all kinds of people, including two brothers, kind of blood brothers, who both fall in love with her. And there's a big love triangle. There's a lot of geopolitics. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of family bond exploration. And that's what the novel is about.
Well, I happen to have read it. It is amazing, wonderful. Everyone should read it. Um, so, of the characters in your book, who would you most want to have a beer with?
Oh, it's so funny. You write these characters and they're not just your children, they're your best friends, and even the ones that you really don't like, right? Because you want them to be kind of villainous. It's hard because you really get in their heads and you see things through their points of view, and nobody thinks that they're the villain, right? Nobody. Um, but I think that the two men, it's definitely a love story, and it's a love story about people in their 20s. So it's pretty hot, it's pretty spicy in places. But the two guys definitely ended up kind of being a team Eric or a team Strav. The Eric Burton is a physical giant, like 6'9", kind of taciturn, a stoic guy, a brilliant mathematician, a cyber intelligence officer. Um, he has a hard time, very hard time expressing himself, and he's very dependent on his younger adopted brother, who's emotionally dependent on a guy named Strav Becky, who's half Mongolian and half English, from a diplomat, a very handsome, great athlete who has the gift of gab, hyper articulate kind of guy, very charismatic, but definitely a dark streak, definitely Machiavellian. Whereas Eric is kind of more a noble, kind of virtuous character. The two of them together, oh, I had so much fun writing it. I had so much fun being in the room with them together because the playoff of the brothers is a big part of the book. So to have a beer with the two of them while they're kind of going at each other, and Straub is kind of interpreting what Eric's really thinking, and Eric is constantly exasperated with this impossible creature that he adores more than anyone. And watching the back and forth and the topics that they would cover, from everything from Eric trying to talk about his quantum mechanics and astronomy and physics, and Straub going off on his Shakespeare, and the current politicians. It would just be a blast of an evening. It would be a lot of fun.
For what it's worth, I'm Team Eric.
I know. I was talking to some people about it. It was funny, and it is a pretty solid dividing line. down the middle. One is definitely more of an anti-hero character, and the other is definitely more straight, and in many ways more admirable, right?
Mhm.
But there are times everybody's got qualities that depends on the environment are valuable or not valuable, right? The environment changes and things that were not useful at all or worked against you in one environment or political situation, things flip and all of a sudden the other skill sets and temperament become much more useful. It's interesting. I try to play with that in the book.
Mhm.
Uh,
So who would be your bestie?
Alexandra Toshin, who is 23, is definitely a mix of a lot of young women that I was very privileged to know, and are still some of my best girlfriends, obviously, but they're older now. Uh, she's a poignant character, and yet she's a very, very driven, strong-minded young woman. Um, but she's also kind of impossible. She's brilliant. She's a polymath. She can cover anything academically. She's a total geek. Maybe not surprisingly, she's quite beautiful. Her looks actually are kind of what drive the book because she's unusual looking. And so she gets a lot of attention, which is not something that you want if you're in her position, and she can't really avoid it despite herself. She's very, very funny. She's a mimic, she's a comic, she's a wild prankster. She's always getting in trouble because she can't stop doing pranks on people, even though she's incredibly clumsy and totally gawky. She wants to try everything. She wants to try horseback riding and she always falls off. She wants to climb mountains and she falls down. She will lead people into really terrible situations and then have to think her way out. But she always has a huge crowd of people around her because she's incredibly gregarious. And at the bottom level, she's also very empathetic. She has a pretty good understanding of what makes people tick, and her basic nature is to want to help people. And she does, even sometimes though it's not the right thing for herself. So yeah, she would be a great long-term, lifelong friend.
And who would you banish? Who would you kick to the curb? Hard to do that when they're all your
It's
babies.
funny because like I was talking about it before, right? You want it to be the villain of the story, right? But it's really hard for me because you put yourself so solidly in their heads and you get it, right? So the person who ends up being a trigger for a lot of bad things happening is named Jacob. And Jacob has two little girl twin daughters that he's raising himself. And he adores these girls more than life. And what he wants is to make the world a safer place for his daughters. But his idea of what's a safer place for his daughters is really, really bad for a lot of other people, especially people like Alex, right? And I wrote this long before ICE. I wrote this long before all of that. It takes, how long it takes to get a book written and to get out there. But there are definite, really uncomfortable echoes in it now about refugees, and what it means to have people here illegally who have, especially the DACA type kids
Mhm.
who've been here almost from birth and don't remember any other places. So Jacob is a evangelical kind of person who really thinks he's making, in this case, what's an allied nations, a kind of the old allies from kind of World War II situation. He really believes he's making it a safer place by getting rid of basically illegals, especially people from the equivalent of the Soviet Union, who he believes, and a lot of people, and actually maybe with some reason, that they're certainly going to be more likely to have terrorist acts and things like that. So it's hard to be with Jacob for any real amount of time because it's kind of the one focus of his life. It's the one thing he talks about, the one thing he thinks about. And it's a terrible thing if you happen to be impacted by it, right? Like she is. But he's also that sheer passion that he has about this. And also he's, maybe not surprisingly, an incredibly attractive man. And that love for his little twin daughters is also a very attractive thing, and you kind of get it. So Alex ends up in his orbit also, and it becomes a very, very complicated relationship. So I would not want him in our world, even though honestly, he might be actually kind of interesting to get a beer with or hang out or have breakfast Sunday brunch with him and his little girls.
That's what makes a good villain, though, is that they're not pure evil, that they may have.
Well, you've mastered that. I mean, I've read your books, and maybe I'm talking out of turn here, but they're fantastic. And one of the reasons that I think they are truly so incredible, remarkable, is because your villain, the coach guy in one of them, isn't really a villain. I mean, you see where he's coming from. You understand it. You put him in a context of the time and place, but also his own upbringing and things that happened to him. And when you see the world through his eyes very, very well. And so it's hard to really call him a villain, even though they can do things that are terrible.
I'd still kick them to the curb.
It's true.
Thank you for joining us, for saying such nice things about my books. It was great talking to you. Everybody, please read Edge of the Known World. I'll put links up so you can easily find them. And again, thanks for joining us, Sheri Joseph, Edge of the Known World.
Huge fun. Thank you so much.